Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Ian Robinson. I'm the Chief Architect at Titania, and I work closely with our customers and partners to help shape our NIPA Enterprise solution, which I'll be demonstrating in a few minutes. At Titania, our solutions automate an inside-out view of security and compliance vulnerabilities across networking infrastructure, enabling risk-prioritized remediation to shut down attack vectors that pose real-world threats to the enterprise. And today, we'll be looking specifically at how NIPA Enterprise can help you remediate your PCI DSS non-compliances, starting with your most critical ones first. This is particularly relevant when we consider the findings of the piece of market research published in March, which determined that less than 40% of senior cybersecurity decision makers are able to effectively prioritize risks to their CDE. This remains one of the biggest challenges when trying to improve an organization's security and compliance posture. So today, I'll be showing you how NIPA Enterprise can help you demonstrate continuous compliance with PCI DSS 4.0 by enabling you to make the shift from ad hoc sampling on an annual basis to scheduling assessments of every device in your cardholder data environment, every day if you want to, and have the resources to act on the results. But we'll also be talking about how scheduling regular assessments only goes so far when it comes to improving your compliance posture. The real power of NIPA Enterprise is in its proactive auditing capability and the ability to view your non-compliances through an attacker's lens. As you know, PCI DSS 4.0 recommends regularly assessing networking infrastructure, so routers, switches, and firewalls, to ensure organizations gain increased security from compliance continuously, assuring that the cardholder data environment is adequately segmented and protected. So we'll take a look at how network owners can increase the coverage and cadence of networking infrastructure assessments, prioritize remediation of non-compliances, and shut down real-world threats. This demo will cover how NIPA Enterprise assures that networks are adequately segmented at all times, how to generate evidence-based reports of pass-fail compliance with PCI DSS 4.0, and how to prioritize and expedite mean time to fix non-compliances and reduce the attack surface. But first, let's talk about attack surfaces and segmentation. Zero trust segmentation and attack surface management are hot topics right now, and it's hardly a surprise when we consider the financial impact of application downtime, which VentureBeat averages at around $20.1 million per year. Zero trust segmentation is absolutely critical in attack prevention and a prevention of attack proliferation, containerizing the threat and preventing unwanted privilege escalation and lateral movement across the network. It instantly reduces the attack surface and also helps target remediation effort and resource, using threat intelligence to inform risk prioritization and remediation, allowing organizations to view what is most critical to them, but also what is most likely to be exploited right now. For example, organizations can be tasked with tens of thousands of these vulnerabilities on their networking devices. Patching each and every one of these devices is time-consuming and is likely to affect their operation. So where should they start first to gain the most benefit? However, effective segmentation is reliant on effective attack surface management, which comprises of asset discovery. Ultimately, you want to know what is on your network at any point in time. Asset validation. Should it be on your network? If it shouldn't be, you want to kick it off. Asset inventory. If it should be on your network, it should be logged, monitored, and analyzed, and then assessed. Asset assessment. The security and compliance posture should be checked to ensure that it should continue to remain on the network. This approach ensures we're looking at our networks, considering them from all angles, the way that an attacker would. In an ideal world, all of your critical data and the devices protecting it would be disconnected from the rest of the world, air-gapped in a bunker under a mountain somewhere guided by a security detail. If it's not connected, how can a remote attacker gain access? In practice, the systems with critical data are not only fed by other systems, but often pushed to other systems too, so they need to be connected. However, they only need to be connected to what is essential for operation. Let's imagine for a second that you're already breached. What does your network infrastructure topology look like? Is everything flat? If an attacker lands on a machine on the network, this leaves them only one hop away from the CDE, but also exposes a huge attack surface to deploy an attack such as ransomware with greater impact. Are some parts of the network, like the CDE for instance, isolated and segmented, but everything else remains flat, leaving a minimal attack surface for the CDE but a large remaining attack surface for the rest of the organization's network? Is everything isolated and segmented according to network function, keeping the attack surfaces as minimal as physically possible to support the organization's operation? Does Daisy's laptop from human resources need to be connected physically to the same network that houses or has access to a CDE? The ultimate mitigating control is to physically separate these segments. If Daisy's laptop becomes infected with a modern variant of ransomware, it cannot move laterally to more critical areas of the network, such as the CDE. So, to conclude, Zero Trust effective network segmentation gives you a reduction of attack surface, reducing the area open to potential threat, containerization of a threat and preventing the proliferation of an attack such as ransomware, easier to implement access controls and reduces the organization's exposure to insider threat, and full control over operation bandwidth. So let's look at why you'd add Nipper Enterprise to your cybersecurity tech stack to help assure this networking infrastructure at scale. Nipper Enterprise accurately assesses your routers, switches and firewall devices to check that they comply with the relevant PCI DSS requirements. It does this with the precision of a pen tester, so you can evidence at the point of audit your compliance with the standard and detect any instances where there are non-compliances and your CDE is at risk. And because Nipper Enterprise does this automatically and at scale, it means you can assess devices more regularly. Because what was secure yesterday at the point of audit is not necessarily secure today. Back to the point of zero trust, where we verify rather than just trust that our devices remain secure and our networks adequately segmented. Nipper Enterprise syncs up to many CMDB or config repositories and will pull down segmentation data to classify those device references. In as little as 3 minutes, you can sync up to a ServiceNow CMDB and register 10,000 devices. The platform inherits segmentation metadata and taxonomy mapping for these devices. This is all done passively. As the platform is performing its assessments from what is in the CMDB, Nipper Enterprise does not affect the operational bandwidth of your critical network. It takes just 3 easy steps to schedule a PCI DSS 4.0 assessment on your CDE networking infrastructure. You first target the segment you want to assess. You then choose what assessments you want to perform on that segment across all those devices, for example PCI DSS 4.0 or an MVD assessment or a best practice security audit. Finally, you choose your cadence, so how frequently this assessment should be carried out throughout the year. For example, quarterly to support PCI DSS evidence for audit, or as continuously as daily to drive security from compliance. The schedules then perform the assessments at the given cadence, and all of the evidence is collected, consolidated, and can be pushed to various different platforms such as a SIEM, for example, Elastic or Splunk. Not all non-compliances are equal, and from an attacker's point of view, for example, some misconfigurations and vulnerabilities are exploited more commonly by known attack groups targeting specific industries. Nipper Enterprise enriches this data being pushed to these platforms with many different risk lenses, allowing you to risk prioritize your posture views and your remediations accordingly. I will talk about this and demonstrate this in more detail shortly. Whilst Nipper Enterprise makes it possible to automate the automatable PCI DSS 4.0 requirements relevant for networking devices each and every day on the CDE segments, in practice this is a lot of repetitive data being generated. So it's worth considering what is the typical frequency of changes to the networking device configurations. As we discussed earlier, changes to networking devices that open exposure to attack or either accidental or nefarious. Conducting an assessment on that device after that change has occurred can help to answer that question, but most importantly, identify it as an indicator of compromise, inform incident response, and help shut down that threat. Let's not forget that threats often come from the inside. For example, a disgruntled employee or someone looking to expose valuable data for financial gain. A perfect example here is that an attacker might focus on non-repudiation by switching off audit logging to mask or hide the next phase of their attack, which might be to open up a firewall rule or create a new interface to suit their mission in gaining access to the CDE segment. They may do the first phase and wait to see how effective organizations' incident responses are. Proactive assessment gives you that visibility of change and can report this non-compliance of PCI DSS 4.0 requirement 10. It does so by detecting changes in the CMDB and following a configurable set of proactive assessment rules, such as soon as a device in the CDE segment has changed, perform a PCI DSS 4.0 assessment. So continuous assessment can be achieved in a practical way by monthly or quarterly snapshot scheduled assessments from a zero trust perspective, and then proactively assessing devices as and when their configurations change. But how can we take proactive assessment to the next level to really inform our remediation workflows and proactively improve our compliance posture? Especially when CISA reports that around 4% of all software vulnerabilities since 2019 have actually been exploited. This would include vulnerabilities arising from unpatched software. While Zero Trust effective network segmentation reduces the attack surface, attack frameworks provide additional risk lenses and threat intelligence to better understand what exposure there is on these attack surfaces. Understanding how attackers operate is key and essential to assessing risk and exposure to attack, prioritization and remediation of networking devices, and protecting critical areas of the network such as the cardholder data environment. And this is key to targeting your remediation effort and resource. Using threat intelligence to inform risk prioritization and remediation, allowing organizations to view what is most critical to them, but also what is most likely to be exploited right now. Most organizations may be tasked with tens of thousands of vulnerabilities on their networking devices due to out-of-date software. Patching each and every one of those devices is time-consuming and is likely to affect operation. So where should they start first to gain the most benefit? By looking at what techniques and tactics are being used in the wild by threat actors and threat groups, it allows organizations to start to ask the questions like, what are we doing to prevent privilege escalation? Commonly used in attack such as ransomware, for example, what is our current risk posture to this technique? Keeping track of these techniques, tactics, who is using them and what industries they are targeting can help organizations to isolate and report on exposure to these. Organizations like MITRE do exactly just this and provide the necessary intelligence. Nipper Enterprise can augment its data with this intelligence, giving organizations the power to answer these important questions and defend by looking through an attacker's lens. Hopefully you'll agree that this creates a very powerful dataset to feed into risk prioritization and remediation plans. Let me show you how Nipper Enterprise does this. Let's start at the beginning. We have a populated, up-to-date ServiceNow CMDB containing the device configuration of our routers, firewalls and switches. First, we can securely access the Nipper Enterprise platform via a modern browser and providing multi-factor authentication. Next, we register the CMDB with the platform by providing some necessary details. It's important to note here that the Nipper Enterprise platform only requires read-only access to the CMDB. As soon as we complete the process, the platform will begin syncing with that CMDB so that it is aware of both the devices and their segmentation data. The platform does not fetch nor does it store the configuration of those devices. It just stores the references ready to fetch as and when an assessment is triggered. As you can see, in a small fraction of time, we've successfully synced with almost 10,000 devices in the ServiceNow CMDB, and we are now ready to schedule assessments. Now, I mentioned earlier that in 3 easy steps, schedules could be created to perform assessments on devices on specific segments at a chosen cadence. Step 1 is to choose the segment we wish to assess. In this case, devices that form part of Acme LLC, that reside at base X and are classified as firewalls, for instance. Next, we choose which assessment we wish to make, in this case PCI DSS 4.0, and finally, we choose how frequently we want this assessment to be automatically triggered, in this case every month. That's it. The platform will now perform this assessment every month for the devices in that segment. In this particular case, we can see that 122 devices form the segment of the network. The platform has now begun performing the PCI assessments for all of these devices. As the platform begins to complete an assessment against each device, we can look at the results. For each of the devices, a comprehensive report will be automatically generated. It contains a risk prioritized summary on compliances versus non-compliances and heat map analysis. Where there is a non-compliance, you can navigate straight to the detail. The report contains evidence of what tests were conducted in order to draw a conclusion on the non-compliance against the standard, as well as the outcome and supporting evidence of those tests. Where appropriate, the report contains device-specific remediation, whether this is Cisco ASA Firewall or Palo Alto, Juniper, Checkpoint, F5 or Fortinet, to name a few. Equally, we provide the same level of fidelity in the report for the requirements and testing procedures where the device is compliant against the standard. As well as the human readable report we just saw, containing a lot of detail around the non-compliances, the risk lenses and the evidence supporting it, all of this data is automatically pushed into platforms like Splunk or Elastic, and integrated with them is easy. Let me demonstrate some of the posture analysis you can do with the data that the NIPA Enterprise platform produces. As we are scheduling assessments, the SIEM can provide historical analysis of the network risk posture for PCI DSS 4.0. Here we can see a trending analysis view. We can target specific segments to analyze. For example, the devices being assessed over time can be correlated with the pass-fail ratio over time, and the non-compliances can be correlated over time too, but broken down by their risk rating, allowing you to see the effectiveness of your risk prioritized remediation. Are we fixing the most critical non-compliances first? Equally, do we have configuration drift, or are we just assessing more devices as we onboard them onto the network? You can start to look at a specific point in time and the posture around that. You can start to see the breakdown of non-compliances against the requirements and the individual testing procedures. This allows you to start asking questions such as, which devices are non-compliant in this segment against a particular testing procedure? For these devices, you can link directly back to the comprehensive report that was generated from that assessment that we saw earlier. As well as putting up the same evidence on what tests were performed, the outcome of those tests, and the device-specific remediation where appropriate in the SIEM platform itself. I talked earlier about organisations like MITRE providing threat intelligence by monitoring which threat groups are using which tactics and techniques to attack specific industries. Above and beyond performing an assessment, the NIPA Enterprise platform augments its assessment findings with this threat intelligence, allowing you to look at your network risk posture through an attacker's lens. MITRE have produced a navigator view which we have been able to replicate as the posture view backed by the NIPA Enterprise data. Tactics are illustrated across the top, and underneath all of the techniques associated with that tactic. Again, you can target a specific segment and only look at the data for that segment, giving you a MITRE ATT&CK technique exposure for that segment. As you can see, we have ragged this dashboard based on the risk of this exposure, red being the most critical, and you can drill down into a specific technique and ask such questions like, what is our exposure on this segment to impaired offences? Which devices are causing this exposure? What do we need to do to remediate? And what is the risk prioritised order? As well as a device being misconfigured, exposing MITRE ATT&CK technique commonly used by a threat group, software vulnerabilities are also exploited by these threat groups. When performing a vulnerability assessment in NIPA Enterprise, this MITRE ATT&CK intelligence is augmented into the data pushed into the SIM. Here we have built a similar dashboard specifically looking at vulnerabilities through a MITRE ATT&CK lens. Furthermore, you can filter those down to CISA catalogue known exploited vulnerabilities to narrow the focus on assessing your MITRE ATT&CK exposure. Now we can ask questions like, what devices need to be patched in order to shut down the exposure to impaired offences? 86 devices here is a lot more manageable than 10,000, especially if this is a technique known to be exploited by attacks against an organisation in my industry. I also just threw in looking at CISA's catalogue of known exploited vulnerabilities there. NIPA Enterprise provides the additional known exploited vulnerability data with its assessments. This allows you to track trends in your network risk against known exploited vulnerabilities. Also track the breakdown by their risk criticality. Equally, you can see the high-level risk posture view at a specific point in time, allowing you to ask questions such as, which are the most critical CVEs on my network, and which of my devices are at most risk? You can target a specific CVE and ask what devices should be remediated to shut down that vulnerability exposure. You can also target a specific device and see in a risk prioritised view all of the CVEs it is vulnerable to. By providing both network risk posture data for both configurations of these devices, as well as the vulnerabilities in the software that is running on them, you can hopefully see the power in which you can start to defend your networks by viewing their exposure through an attacker's lens. Patching these devices regularly will take you so far, but a device with an insecure administration protocol enabled, for example, or an any-to-any filtering rule, will remain a security issue on that network until it is found and fixed. Thank you for joining us today. If there are any questions, please head over to our website where you can request a demo for you and your colleagues, or inquire about a proof of value assessment where you can run the NIPA Enterprise PCI DSS report on your own data to understand your compliance posture and how you can improve it.